Welcome to Spiritual Conversations, and the topic today is, what do you think of karma? Usually it's a controversial topic, I find, when karma comes up, so I'm hoping we'll have some robust conversation today, or maybe we'll all be in agreement, and that'll be great too, whatever. So very happy to have your comments for anyone on the side, anyone viewing, either live or the replay. Welcome. I hope it's going to be beneficial for you, and certainly be interesting for me hosting this as karma. I wonder what karma might come to me of it. Don't you go cooking up anything, you guys. Oh, don't look in your eyes, Jason.
It's okay. I don't believe in karma.
Well, okay. I'm going to pick on you first, Jason.
You walked right into that, Jason. He's going to walk out because he's busy now.
Okay, well, I have no idea, no expectation of what will come out of this conversation. We did have, I think it was last week, prayer. Our conversation was prayer, and that was extremely interesting and engaging with the different beliefs and perceptions about prayer. And I'm imagining that karma might be somewhat similar, but I could be wrong. So, Jason, let's hear it from you. What do you think of karma?
Well, honestly, I'm not quite too into what exactly karma means, but I'll take my normal stance on everything. I believe in it, and I don't believe in it at the same time.
That's quite definitive.
Yeah, it is. I'm a semanticist. It's in my DNA. Let's see. On karma, I'll say that I think operationally, I behave and act as though karma is true. I think I believe that the life events that you're getting are brought to you based on your past experiences, even if it is just within this lifetime or not. So I think that would be my initial subject prompter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe we should start out with all discussions. We should start out by defining the thing it is that we're discussing.
Well, I just happen to have a definition handy, if I can lay my hands on it.
It's a bit of a complex topic because there are so many angles to come at it from. You could just stick with the Sanskrit definition, but then there's like the modern New Age definition as well, and even Taoism has definitions of karma or concepts that could be likened to karma. Even science, has the law of cause and effect. So when we say karma, are we simply generalizing it and saying that it's a cause and effect principle, that my actions will have some repercussion in the future that will either positively or negatively affect me? Could we sort of, that's a loose general.
That's the basic understanding that I put the topic up with, and then I did go and search for some definitions just to see what others were saying, and one that I did pull off, and I don't actually have the source, it was only a not really a recognizable source, it was just a commentary somewhere, and it did say what you just said, Vin. It's basically the law of cause and effect, so that every thought, action and word is a cause which then produces an effect. And then I did pull off another one. It says the Pali term karma literally means action or doing. Any kind of intentional action, whether mental, verbal or physical, is regarded as karma. It covers all that is included in the phrase thought, word and deed. So it is basically that understanding that all our actions, thoughts, words and deeds, is subject to the law of cause and effect.
I agree with that in theory. However, I'd like to throw my views on this, because the question is, what do you think of karma? So I think that in defining karma, it might serve us better to actually share what we think it means to us, or what it does mean to us, and that might actually give us a greater sense then of being able to be more comfortable in our own belief of what karma is. Having been really connected to my worldview of yoga, and that for me isn't about stretching on a piece of rubber mat. It's about a lifestyle and a philosophy, where karma is a part of that. I was very confronted with I hadn't realised I had this belief, but I was very confronted in realising that I had started to believe through that, through the doctrines of yoga, probably through my Catholicism as well, that in actual fact, bad things only really happen to bad people. So if you did bad shit, you got bad shit back. I actually don't. I don't believe in that, because you know what? Some really bad, horrible things happen to really good people.
Yeah.
Plus, there's the concept that it's hereditary, so that you may have to pay for the sins of your father.
Yeah. So that's been a really interesting unraveling for me, and I have a belief in other stuff that I won't go into here because it probably doesn't fit the conversation. But I really wanted to throw that out there, because I think there is a new age concept of or you do bad shit, and you know if you're someone who's doing really good things, then only good things will come to you. Nah, sorry. As an old lady of 52 years of age, that's not the reality I live in.
Yeah, but you may not be looking at the big picture. You know, like for example,
I'm looking at the big picture, all right.
the mistakes made by your previous lives, maybe 6 lives ago, or maybe the life of your grandmother.
Well, now that you've gone into that, thank you. Because what I wanted to say before, and I held back on, was I actually have a belief in reincarnation in a system, what I call, and others call, the Akashic Records, which is, for me, it's based on a whole set of agreements that can be made prior to incarnation, which then can impact on what I believe karma to be about. But there's a whole lot of other stuff behind that it's just not a general comment, if that makes sense.
No, I think we were talking about justice in the last blab, and when I get into karma, I think that's kind of around the same lines for me. I feel like karma is just another way of saying that the universe is just, and if you don't, I guess it's a point of view. I'll take that is that karma is a point of view where you look at the universe as just, whether or not you have the perspective to see it, that everything is happening because it's meant to be. I think that all kind of ties in with karma, and it may not be that you can see it. It may be because of some past life, whether, like Vin said, whether it's passed down from your father genealogically, or whether it's passed from past lives, however you bounce around through past lives and ending up here. But I think it ties in with justice and just saying that, I
think it does, but this concept still of if you do good things, if you just keep doing good things and think good thoughts, then good things will happen to you. That's where I see those things.
Yeah, I don't know that plays out in. I can't think of the title of the book.
There's a whole world out there that's external to you, which influences you. So you may get hit by a bus tomorrow. I mean, someone
that's
might.
Right, but the notion of this that we've been fed through some of the New Age literature and dare I say it, products, the stuff, without actually going into the depths of what can sit underneath that and to inform that.
That's a really good point that has to be a part of this discussion, I think, because to me, it seems that you can't use the word karma without all of that hippie baggage being sort of attached to it. And I mean, even it's worse than hippie. It's New Age,
Yeah, so it is. That's right.
I mean, I sort of think, I shouldn't call it hippie because I think I give a lot more credit to the hippies than I do the New Agers. But but
I didn't say it.
but it's a real tradition. It's got a history. It's not just some New Age crappy thing that is what you're referring to, Bronwyn. That sort of tainted it. So we sort of need to strip away from that and get back to what it actually is.
And often,
how does this relate with prayer also? Because I think that kind of goes along with the religious prayer. It's like if I pray, and I'm good, then good things are going to happen, and I'm going to get what I want, and I'm going to be successful in my business because I'm thinking good and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
How does that tie in? Did that come up in the last conversation on prayer at all?
It did to a degree, and it was interesting that we had Mark. Was it Mark? Come in, and he had a completely different view of prayer, which was fantastic. He didn't agree with it at all. He didn't have a belief, and he didn't think there was any relevance in putting it out there and praying in a sense, or having that intention, and other than you go about with motivation and confidence and actions, and you get out of that other airy-fairy realm, and that was great to hear that as well, and we welcomed that view. But I just wanted to pick up on what Jonathan wrote up earlier. He said, if you're a Christian, this might interfere, like karma might interfere with the idea of repentance and forgiveness. And I thought, that's quite interesting, because, and not only Christians, I think, I don't know, there are so many religions.
Well, when he said that, sorry, when I read those words, he said them. He said quite a bit since then, but when he said those words, I thought instantly of the caste system in India, where the untouchables are considered to be repaying the debt of karma, so no one helps them. So they think, well, I'm not going to help that poor person who's an untouchable because they deserve what they've got. This is the life that they deserved from past karma, and so it's then sets up a system of where you've got a justification for neglecting the homeless or the poor.
But that's in their karma.
Yeah.
And then the people who are doing that's in their karma. So I guess my question is, where does free will tie in with karma, the concept of karma, if anyone has any, because if everything is kind of set and done, but also we have the ability to think and feel and our actions have impact on the world, then where is that line between everything is determined and I have free will to affect my karma? Yeah,
good point. I know that karma, when I was growing up, I had a family member that she was into, we were talking about it being new agey, and she was into that. And that was always the threat. If I didn't do something right, something she wanted, karma's going to get you.
Well, that is very much like the Christian thing, isn't it? Because that's how I was. Well, that's like God, when you're told as a child, don't steal or don't lie or don't do anything bad because God will punish you, and that the big stick sort of threat is what keeps it all in tow. Yeah,
and that was actually one of my questions for today: is karma somewhat equivalent? Is there a relationship between karma and sin? So you've just raised that. Yeah, and then back to Jonathan's point, is there any place then for
what is sin
and getting out of the cycle?
Yeah, that's right.
Is there any? What was the last question, Margaret? Is there
any place for forgiveness or getting out of that cycle?
I actually think there's a whole lot of judgment sits underneath the what I would say is the misconception of what karma is about. Jason, in response to your question, I do think free will has a huge part in our journey as what I see as being spiritual beings having a human experience. And free will, we have this opportunity to make conscious decisions, to be unconscious if we choose to. the concept of sin, Marg, for me, it's not something that sits comfortable with me, because for me it's about there's a construct of very heavy judgment there around sinning. Like, what really is sinning? Seriously, what? Yeah. Yeah, don't tell my mother I said that, by the way. No, joking. But, like, what is it, really? And this is someone who was drenched in Catholicism from a very young age. I just kind of think, well, wasn't that really a construct of judgment that allowed people to be able to then put punishment in place based on some man-made rules?
I think, for me, where I look at this in terms of ecology, like that's where my brain goes to right away in this, and thinking about things in terms of systems and parts of wholes. Mm-hmm. It's like we're part of a larger system. Yep. And so the way that this is also the way that I look at religion in a way, is that if I'm part of a whole, then if what I'm doing is aligned with the best of that whole, then I am not in sin, or I am aligned, or I'm in flow, or however you want to call it. Mm. So for me, it's not sinning based on some man-made arbitrary rule, but it's based on, my place in a larger context, and the repercussions come back based on that. It's like if you're smoking, maybe you'll get some lung cancer, maybe you won't. If you're driving cars and having smoke steeps come up and it's going to affect the environment it doesn't give a crap. It's going to readjust. And maybe you get wiped out. Maybe you don't get wiped out. Maybe maybe because we're shooting up smoke steeps out in the USA, Haiti is going to get wiped out by a tsunami. It's not because they did anything wrong, but I think it was what Jonathan said earlier about, it also ties in with how you identify the self in Buddhism. Or if we're all one, then, then that kind of goes, well, maybe you did, maybe it's a societal karma, or maybe it was a larger scale, to not take it personally when you look at it from the big picture.
It's a big topic, Marg. I think this has got scope to be an ongoing conversation, this one, because it's huge.
Yeah.
I think sin, though, is really just a religious word that means rules. So, we could say, and it's true. It's, in the modern times where we don't have Christianity to wave the stick over us, we have more modern constructs called laws. And so it's a sin in modern terms to go and drive your car while you're drunk, because you may crash and burn or kill someone. So, that's really just the modern equivalent of a sin that was created. Yeah, it's just...
However, in previous times, they had laws and religious laws. So the two did coexist.
Coexist. True.
So,
there's still cultures that are there that the church is the state. Not to use the word church loosely, but actual entire countries where the political bodies are religious.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are. Hey, I'm happy to jump out. Jonathan, do you want to jump in?
Jonathan was saying that he doesn't want to jump in, but I think if we pressure him, he might.
Here we go. I'm out. Here we go, Jonathan.
Yeah. He's got a lot to say.
Vacating.
Yeah. Thanks, Bron. Here we are.
Before, here he is.
Yeah.
I won't start another discussion then until he arrives.
Hello. Hey,
Jonathan.
Thanks for your contributions on the side there, Jonathan.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to give them.
It's a bit distracting though, so it's better to have you here in the room so that we can.
When you've got a lot to say, it's great if you jumped in. So let's go back to the basic question that we all started with. What do you think of karma?
It's a broad question. There's a lot you can say about karma. You first have to say that it's originally a very old idea. So I know that it's associated with current trends, but it's an ancient idea. I mean, it's from a religion much older than Christianity, much older than America. It's a very, very old idea. Now you also have to talk about the fact that there are multiple versions of it. You have a Hindu version. You have a Buddhist version. You have a Taoist version. You actually, once you read the Buddhist scripture, you realize that there's a Christian version, right? So you have to talk about which version you're talking about, and then once you do that, you can talk about different problems that it might have philosophically with its interactions with other parts of those religions specifically, or if you were to attempt to combine the religions, would it work or not? And that's an exercise I'm interested in.
Would it work as an idea? Is that what you're
Yes,
saying, or as a concept?
Mutually exclusive with something else, insofar as it could not stand with the other thing, and both be the case. Now, Christianity has these as well. I mean, we cannot make sense of free will. If you can go through divinity school, and you'll find them just finally admit that shit. So they don't do it on a lay level, but we can't make sense of that.
What do you mean we can't make sense of it, Jonathan? I'm sorry I just want to pick your brain while I got you in the chair.
So, in grad school, you encounter all of these debates that you weren't told existed when you were sitting in the pews. And so what ends up happening is you just find men who are polarized on either side of philosophical issues like that, where things can't both be the case, determinism and free will. And so they just are polarized on the two sides. You're just not exposed to that at a lay level. That happens in grad school.
Just to explain a little bit what you mean by free will, because Peter's saying, freedom to choose seems fairly straightforward to me.
I'm talking on its deeply philosophical level, like deep.
And can I also one thing I want to add also is that if you would give me a chance in a moment, I would like to challenge that they're mutually exclusive.
Sure,
but I enjoy destroying.
I just mean to present that as an example.
Yeah.
Of a division that you find that does happen. And you'll find the same divisions happen philosophically within Buddhist schools of thought, very high level thinking, where they say Atman, or the idea that there is no self, right, can't coexist with the idea of reincarnation, because what is being put in the next body? Okay, this is just an issue that happens philosophically. And from this spot comes different schools, right, within Buddhism. And from these schisms come the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church. And from these schisms come, all these different denominations that we now see spread across the globe. But it's because at that high level of thinking, Aquinas didn't agree with Augustine, and Martin Luther tagged his 95 Theses on the door.
Can I propose a possibly paradigm shifting way of looking at it, where they could both mutually exist?
Sure. There are, and this is called probably compatibilism philosophically, but go ahead.
Okay. So let's say that everything is determined, right? And the metaphor that I would use for that is just the infinite book. Let's say the book that contains all like the ultimate choose your own adventure book. Did any of you guys ever read a choose your own adventure book? Yeah. And let's say it's so it's basically a book where you're reading the book and you get to a choice point, and it says, if you choose to pick the apple from the tree, go to page 12. If you leave the apple alone, go to page 8. And you go and you make your choice and you go to the next page. But both choices exist in the text. So although you have free will, both choices are predetermined.
Could you have done differently? Written.
Say that again.
Could you have done differently?
Of course you could have. I mean, so not of course you could have. What I'm saying is that, well, one is that I'm operating off of the presupposition, the assumption that you could have, because both chapters existed in the book of where you chose one or the other, because it's an infinite book, right? And so both of them actually exist. Let's say it's a multiverse type of scenario, where there's a you that did it and there's a you that didn't do it. There's a you that chose 12, there's a you that chose 8, and they both exist. And then it doesn't become whether or not you did it, because you did both. The question is, which you are we referring to, right? And so yeah, I mean, well, yeah.
you at least have to admit, even if you think you've got it figured out, that it's difficult. It's difficult. It's a difficult.
I mean, all I'm saying is that if everything exists, if infinite possibilities exist, and they're all simultaneously coexisting, then that's predetermined, because everything is predetermined. I'm just throwing out a scenario, and yet where the branches come off, you chose this way and he chose that way, or you chose this way and that you over here chose that way. But either way, the choice existed.
And the multiverse that you're playing with is a new idea that these men didn't have.
That's what I'm saying. That's why it would be a paradigm.
You have to realize that. So, and there are open theistic options too available that don't have to hold a multiverse. But you can Google open theism, and it's just going to say that the future doesn't exist. And two, you can get around it that way. So there are many ways to get around it, but I just mean to say that it's from these ways of getting around it at philosophical levels that schools are developed. You could go start the Schneiderism now with yours.
I just did.
And that's what happened.
I thought I did. This is on the record, so technically I did. Just. Yeah, and yeah, go ahead, Margaret.
When you were talking about the different people choosing the different pages, and Jason, it made me think from my mental health profession aspect, what about multiple personalities? So that at any particular moment, the same person has chosen the different pages. So it does become complex. So who is the person? It gets to be a bit of a deeper question then.
Yeah, I mean, that's an identity within, I would say, an overall embodiment. So that's all parts of it.
Surely it comes into the question and the topic of free choice. A choice has been made, and who has made it? And we see that in our legal system as well, that if mental health issues exist, leniency can come into play with sentencing, because it wasn't their free will as such, because it was marred by drugs or alcohol or whatever. So, yeah, that concept of free will gets a bit muddied.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that brings it back to karma, I think.
Well, that insofar as karma gets muddy too. That's all I meant to. I was using it as an example. I didn't mean to lead us astray. That's a very interesting topic too, though. And if you wanted to, schedule a discussion on that, I'm sure you would get some good stuff. You can talk for days on it. We've been arguing for thousands of years over it. So, we fought wars in that argument's name. So.
Sorry, what did you hone in on then? I missed.
I said we fought wars in the name of that argument that we were just, discussing right there, that division over libertarianism and libertarian free will. And so it's a great discussion to have.
Yeah. I come back to thinking like karma is often taken to be an eye for an eye. So that's karma, the action, and it's justifiable. So what do you think of that?
Well, eye for an eye is an issue given in the Mosaic law that is literally, that you're taking that from Mosaic law. Mosaic laws, when they say that, it was a way of doing the legal system, that the retribution was equal to that which was done. This is different. This is talking about a metaphysical property, where literally that which I do is calculated and then done back to me. And that's different. So
it really comes back to the concept of quantum physics in the way I see it, that every thought, word, or action has its energy field. And as in the physical energy field, when something's rolled out, there is an effect. It's the cause and effect. So if something's happening at this particular energy, the vibrational level, it will attract a certain result.
Like, why can't, I'm just thinking about Margaret's example there. Why can't eye for an eye be considered karma? Because, you know, who's dishing out the karma? If you hit me and I automatically hit you back, I mean, you know, that's a cause and effect. You shouldn't have hit me.
I understand the analogy. All I'm saying is that when it's issued in the scriptures, like literally I'm telling you where it was quote, where that principle eye for an eye comes from historically. It was issued as a legal thing, like the same way that we say a man is considered innocent until proven guilty. It's that. And then when Buddhism institutes karma, or Hinduism institutes karma, they're not doing that as a legal thing. Where you know, it's not we'll cut off your arm if you know you cut somebody else's arm. It's that it's a metaphysical property. And so I was just trying to just make that distinction up front.
Yeah,
sure.
I think that would fall within the umbrella of karma because it's a cause and effect and it's an action. But it's
you could say that the government is performing karma on them. You know, when they institute eye for an eye, kind of.
I think and this is just my way of thinking about it right now. Jason, what day is it? You know, September 24th, 2015's thoughts. But the first thing that comes to my mind is that when I think about that situation, I think about that being more of the government's karma as opposed to the person's. Although there is a relationship between the two, obviously, because they're engaging and interacting with each other. Does that make sense?
I think it comes back.
It's a loose thought.
My problem with the idea of thoughts or words having energy is language itself. And it's the fact that language changes. So bad, and I could be thinking bad, but if I'm meaning what is meant by, if bad means good in another language, how does the universe, language itself and our thoughts are too contingent upon culture and changing things that are changing for it to operate within that system in any way that I can understand. You know what I'm saying?
Well, Jonathan, I would go on the other side of that. I agree with you, Jonathan, completely. And I would go on the other side and say, well, if we're not looking at the language directly, we would be looking at, because I'm a neurosemanticist. So if we're not looking at the actual semantics part of it, then we'd be looking at the neurological impact in the body, the actual brain components, the hardware. That's, you know, it's the same as behavior. It's a micro behavior. So maybe it's not the word itself, but it's the actual embodiment of the word, which would leave some
goodness.
Sort of. What's that?
I can't do goodness.
You can feel goodness, or well, I guess it's a judgment. I understand, but when you think when you're in a certain state, when you're using words like
this is different than that. Now we're taking it Now we're taking her claim and making it better, insofar as it's not necessarily contingent upon language. But
language is arbitrary, but embodiment, embodied states, and people's brain. You know, you can actually map out a brain function. You can map out people's physiology.
Qualia, though. We don't know where the content of a thought is.
Well, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that the brain, when you think certain thoughts, the brain behaves in a certain way. When you think other thoughts, the brain and body responds differently in other ways. So you don't need to necessarily pinpoint the thought to say that thoughts impact your physiology.
It's culture contingent. It's as though the brain, it's working within the brain's own system.
I'm not quite following you there.
That's fine.
I was just clarifying Margaret's point to say that there is a possibility where it's not necessarily the language, but it does impact your physiology. So words per se don't impact karma, but your embodiment of your thoughts or your thinking can then lead to some sort of every thought has an accompanying behavior, whether it's just a change in the size of your pupils, a rush of blood to the face, a blink of the eye, an increase in the heart rate. Every thought has an associated physiology, and every physiology has an associated thought because you're an embodied being.
So I can't think a thing that my body can't do?
You can't think anything without your body responding. You're a mind-body system. You're not a free-floating mind. You're a sentient being in a body.
Yeah, I understand.
So there's no separation between mind and body. They're an interactive system, just like any ecology.
Do you think mind is an epiphenomenon of the biology?
Mind is a phenomenological representation of a physiological embodiment.
I would suggest that computation is consciousness. What would you say about that? I think I'm a biological computer inside of a material world. I'm made of matter, and consciousness is what happens when something can compute at a certain level.
Well, it is about levels. I refer to it as awareness of lower levels. If you have an awareness of a lower level, then you're conscious. So, for example, if you weren't aware of your awareness, then you wouldn't be conscious. You'd just be aware. But as soon as you become aware of an awareness or aware of any awareness, then that's the kind of common language of it, is that you're conscious of that thought, or you're conscious of that animal, or you're conscious of yourself or your way of being. To be self-conscious is to have an awareness of your concept of self.
Yeah.
So for me, consciousness is just a higher level of awareness of either something on the outside or something on the inside. That's a bit off topic.
We say this is not conscious, but I am conscious, right? And then there are other things that aren't me, but that are conscious, like a plant that is growing, we think might be a little conscious. So it would equate computation to consciousness. And the name that I just shared is Max Tegmark. You can look this up later if you'd like, or whatever. Max Tegmark is a guy at MIT, and he is suggesting that computation is consciousness. So consciousness is what it feels like to be computing. And what is computing? Taking in data and processing it, right?
Yeah, I mean, to equate anything using this is that is a very loose and fluffy.
What gets interesting is when we're actually building minds, is what we're doing, learning how to build them.
So if we bring this back to karma, Bronwyn's trying to, So, Jonathan, I disagree with you. I'll come back to thought and in agreement with Jason that it really doesn't matter what language we're thinking in and what words we're using, because the essential force within us is the intention, whatever concept we want. And we can see that in cross-cultural studies where different cultures come together and they don't speak any of the other language. And yet there is some common understandings in the way they can, communicate. So I don't think to actually be able to articulate a particular word is putting it out there that you'll get karma because of that language, that word, no matter what language or cultural grouping you are in. It's actually the intention and the emotion, as Jason refers to, the embodiment of what you mean by...
You could say, I love you very happily, like, I love you. Or you could go, oh, I love you. And those are, the words are the same. But it's the embodiment.
Or you can say, I love you and absolutely hate the person. You can say, what is it?
Liar.
Yeah, like sure, sure. And does that mean you're embellishing the concept? Or does that mean it's a sarcasm? Sure. So the language is simply the way we intend it to be. And it doesn't even matter if I don't have the words. Like there are plenty of words I don't even know the meanings of. But in context, I get a sense of what's the meaning.
In context. In context. Oh, so this is what I tried to say where I said that. I said that it is contingent upon the brain, that it is within's context, not on some universal context. It is goodness contingent upon the mind. Goodness or badness contingent upon the mind that it's in. It would just have to be, this makes it relative. Goodness, badness, it makes that relative, and we don't typically think of those as those things. Now, I guess those could work then within a larger framework. But yeah, sure, I understand what you mean. I understand what you mean. There has to be a way that karma is a little true. I think even though they weren't philosophers back then or thinking this hard about it or didn't understand quantum physics, There has to be something they were referring to. And I have experienced the phenomenon where it's like, if I did bad things, bad things came to me. That's all I can say. You know, it's like if I did drugs for a period of my life, and bad things happened as a result of that, one could go, evidence of karma. So we just have to admit that there's evidence on all sides. There's also evidence against karma, where I've been real good for like a month and then just like got torn apart the next one. And so we'd have to say that that's evidence against it. The truth is that we just can't verify claims about anything outside of the case.
That's making a massive assumption that you're assuming that karma has a time limit, that you're saying, oh, look, I was good for a month and nothing but bad happened. Yeah, but you could be still...
But if you don't put a time limit on it, there's no way to quantify it in order to test it. It's just this blanket thing.
Well, you know, going back to the original concept of karma, it extends beyond your own lifetime, back to previous lifetimes, back to other people's lifetimes that you're paying the karma for. So, you know, you can't just say, oh, I was good for a month and I didn't get any good come of it, then karma doesn't work. You know, you can't make that conclusion so simply.
It's the same thing I was saying about, like, if one country is like smoking up the atmosphere to death and then all of a sudden another little island gets smashed with a tsunami. Well, it wasn't their fault per se, but you could still say it was their karma.
You're not looking at the big enough picture. You're just looking at a very small part of it and saying, oh.
The Rabbi Rabbi Krishna wrote the book, Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People? And he wrote it from a personal perspective because his son died. And he had lived a very, what he says, a very virtuous life, a very good life. And he was challenged religiously. I'd have to go back and refresh it's on my bookshelf. But
what I was suggesting was that there's evidence both for and against it is all. I just had to give some way of offering evidence for it. It happens in individuals' lives that they find evidence for karma. All I was doing was giving an example of an instance where one might have considered something in their life, an experience, evidence for karma. We have to admit that that exists in some cases, even if there are philosophical problems with the issue. In the same way, we have to admit that there's evidence against it, that we have also done really good things in our lives and bad things have come. I didn't mean... Independent of whether the specific examples work within all understandings of karma is irrelevant. I just mean to say that there's always evidence for and against any of these claims.
You're perceiving it as evidence when it's not, though. That's the difficulty.
Say it again?
You're perceiving something as evidence when it isn't.
Evidence is contingent upon perspective.
Yeah, so it can't simply be evidence because you perceive it to be. Because someone else might not be.
But I can have a bunch of evidence for something that ends up being not true, and you have to admit that.
Well, it's only evidence in your mind, though.
And it's only perceived as
situation. All we have are independent evidences for or against this thing called karma, and then we're exchanging them. What we have to admit is actually the case is that everybody has evidence for and against everything once they communicate. We find some people who have experienced it doesn't happen. We find some people who have experienced it does. We can't verify whether karma is the case or not.
Can you really call it evidence, though, if it's just personal belief systems or personal perceptions? That's not really what I would define as evidence.
Verify it. I mean, it's certainly possible that karma is the case in some sense.
Well, that's the same. Can you guys hear me? I'm freezing up here. Mm-hmm. Can you hear me? Yeah, it's the same thing as saying, well, I walk on the earth, so that's evidence that the earth is flat.
Yeah. I mean, in your mind, you can think that, but it doesn't really mean that it is.
But we haven't proven, but the difference here is that we haven't empirically proven karma not to be the case because karma is fundamentally an unverifiable claim. It's about something that exists outside of the case, a shouldness. That's the difference. That's the difference in the situation.
The way I look at
with all moral claims, whether there is or is not a God, whether this or that man was him, that's the way it is with all those claims. You can't verify them. So what you have to do in this situation is admit that either one could be the case and learn to live in light of that.
That's why I see it in terms, the closest I can come to thinking about karma is in terms of quantum physics. which is a science in its own right now. And more is being discovered in that realm. So it's an invisible realm, yes. However, more is known about the cause and effect and the energy fields around thoughts and words. So to me, that's where karma fits in. And yeah, it's being tested in the dimension of our lifetime by obviously scientists living and researching it now. However, we don't know whether it goes beyond our lifetime or not. That's kind of the unknown.
I think
I'm just speculating about quantum physics because I'm no physicist, and even the physicists don't know what the fuck's going on in that realm. So, and then they say so out loud, when I hear.
Did anyone else? Did he disappear on anyone else's screen?
Yeah,
I didn't think he was still here, but he's audibly here.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
The way I look at it is more, we're talking about empirical evidence. I like to think about it more systemically in terms of systems theory.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still here?
I'm still here.
So when you think about systems theory and how systems interact with each other, you can see that every cause has an effect, and the cause doesn't necessarily, and everything has multiple causations.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily causation, but there's contributing factors.
Yes.
But the question is, do those contributing factors cause it to happen necessarily, or could it have happened otherwise?
In a closed system, everything is, you have the parts are, that's all you're playing with. I mean, these things are bouncing off each other, and there's nothing outside of the system. The system is what is, I guess, is a way of looking at it. I mean, think about it just as small scale. When we talk about getting a larger perspective, think about it as small scale, like Earth's ecosystem. There are cause and effects, and if you just take like a piece of the whole, and you think about it in terms of like a hologram. So this is a fractal, and this is a smaller representation of the larger pattern. So we take the pattern on Earth. If we are, again, I'll use the smokestack and burning fossil fuels. We're digging up fossil fuels, we're burning them, we're shooting them up into the atmosphere. There's going to be an effect on that, which can be measured and proven empirically. And that will come back and impact people. Well, if we look at karma from that perspective, we may be able to have more clarity when we think about this in terms of systems and multi-causation contributing factors. And we start thinking about things more systemically as opposed to linearly, and cause and effect in terms of sequencing linearly. This is why quantum, maybe I agree with you on quantum physics. I agree with you that they don't know what the hell they're talking about. And that's the whole point. They're all arguing about different models that are perhaps inverifiable. And at the end of the day, they have their evidence and they draw these kind of whacked out conclusions about it sometimes. But if you ask the most advanced physicists, they'll tell you they don't know what they're talking about. But in terms of thinking systemically, so the difference between Einstein and Aristotle was that he looked at things systemically as opposed to linearly. And when you get into this kind of non-Aristotelian thinking, then things make more sense.
When you talked about the bigger picture and looking at the little picture, and I'm not sure how you described it now, but it reminded me of Stephen Fry's interview he had with again, I can't remember the religious guy's name, but it was like a very well-known priest, I think. And it was a well publicized interview. And Stephen Fry says, how can there possibly be a God when there are starving people in Africa and there's these diseases of the eye and they go through horrible, torturous suffering and death? That the God that invented this kind of world must be some kind of sick maniac, he says. And I just thought, well, that's such a small-minded viewpoint of the system, where I often think of the children starving in Africa, to use that example, as flies on the back of a horse. The horse, just shifts its butt really quickly and all the flies fly away. It's like, the earth needs to wipe out a large population of people.
This is alarming as fuck. This is
That's what?
Isn't that a scary analogy? Is that just only a scary analogy to me?
Yeah, I don't think that is. I think, again, that's a very a very, when you look at it on the big scale, then you have to kind of depersonalize it.
Yeah.
And go, listen, every time I take a flight, it's not up to me whether or not that plane's going to crash or not, right? But at the end of the day, if it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I mean, this is, again, that's when this becomes real for me, is when I go up in an airplane, right? And I'm like all the way up here in this giant, heavy metal box, and I am out of control. And at the end of the day, that's kind of, I guess wouldn't call it karma, but I go, you know what? If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If it's not, it's not. And that's beyond me and my choices and my decisions right here and now.
Why do you feel scared?
Require an absolute good and evil that enwraps the whole world.
Say that again.
This whole thing would necessarily have to have a good and evil that wraps around that is universal to the entire world. You know what I'm saying?
No. What are you saying?
People say that this action causes that, this good thing causes that good thing, or this bad thing causes
that good and bad
on a global scale, on where tsunamis and this thing. It's like,
Jonathan,
that needs an absolute morality.
Jonathan,
only by the human perception.
Take out good and bad. Take out the words good and bad and replace them with aligned and misaligned.
You're just replacing the thing. You can't prove shouldness.
I am not.
One man's going to say
good
that
for who and bad for who
is bad for the world. One man's going to say the kids dying in Africa is good for the world. You can
I'm
call
not
it
talking about Jonathan.
Jonathan,
I think I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I want to just kind of re-express what I'm saying, and I want to see if you can possibly I'm not asking you to accept it, but I'm asking you just to see if you can understand it.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying, I'm not saying aligned. So good and bad is a very contextual word. What's good for me can be bad for you. Okay? And that's a value judgment. It's an evaluation that exists only within an individual in their context. When I talk about aligned, I'm not talking about aligned with me or aligned with you. I'm talking about aligned with the larger system.
Who defines that larger system? Have we found morality written in the code? No.
No, I'm not talking about morality at all. Morality is out of this conversation.
We know okay, but destruction will be called both good and bad by different people. I mean, if you're just going to refer to destruction as bad.
I'm not talking about a people evaluation of good or bad. Morality does not exist in my model of the world right here and now.
Right.
So my model of the world that I'm talking about, I'm not looking at it from the perspective of good or bad or morality. That's non-existent in my model of the world that I'm communicating to you. But what I'm talking about is alignment with the system. And so what's going to determine, so if I smoke, right, and I get cancer, it could be good for some people, it could be bad for some people, but the smoking caused the cancer most likely. It contributed, it had a high contributing effect.
That presupposes
cancer. If I play in traffic wearing all black at night.
Keep going.
Right?
That presupposes that getting hit by a car is bad. Keep going.
I'm not presupposing that it's bad. I'm saying if I get hit by a car, it's good for some.
You're presupposing getting hit by the car is bad in the first situation. You're presupposing that dying from cancer is bad in the second situation.
I'm not presupposing it's bad. That's your intuition that you're putting on me. So if you hear what I'm saying, because I'm saying right now, I'm telling you that I'm not assuming that. But you're not able to hear. You're not able to hear my thought without.
That's because you want it to work on a global scale.
I'm not. I don't care. I'm indifferent. I'm sharing my model of the world with you.
Sure. Okay. I got it. Got your model.
Okay. So my model is if I'm playing out in traffic at night in the dark, it's probably more likely that I'm going to get hit by a car. Whether that's good or bad is irrelevant. It might be good for the guy that I was going to run over with my car later that day because he was playing in the traffic wearing all black, right? That might be good for him. So good or bad is irrelevant from what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is that there are contributing factors based on my choices that are partly in my control, partly out of my control, but in the larger system, these types of things happen. And it's not about kind of cause and effect. It's more of a systemic thing. There's contributing factors that play a role. So was it just if you take the belief that karma exists, then the answer would be that from this overall big picture, I'm taking the stance. If I choose to say that I believe in karma, I'm taking the stance that says that was just, I'm just too small to see it. And if I say there's no such thing as karma, or that it was just cause and effect and that it was only meant to be, then I am personally choosing to take a stance that says that was good, that was bad, and you jump into an evaluative stance. again, this is just my model of the world.
Mm.
So when it comes to my model of the world, I would prefer to live in a world where I operate believing that everything was meant to be, kind of on a karmic scale, not taking that in a way to say everything was meant to be so it justifies certain actions, or so that I can justify victimization or anything like that. But at the same time saying that when I choose to look at the world through the eyes that everything happens for a reason, it would seem from the outside that I'm behaving morally.
Mm.
But I'm not. It's not based on morality. It's based on alignment within a system. It could be empirical and scientific.
So if I can pull up there, because we've been running for an hour now, but I'd like to pose one final question, and that is, what can we do to effect, if we use the word alignment now, Jason's word alignment, or if other people want to interpret that as good for the world, how can we, is there something that we can do within the concept of karma, perhaps, whatever it is, because we're talking about cause and effect of our thoughts, words and actions. What can we do in order to improve in some minute way, if any way, the alignment of ourselves in the world and obviously the flow of the world in general? One small step for mankind. What can we do?
Well, if I can jump in first, because I think my thoughts follow on from exactly what Jason was just saying. In that, I've just lost it. I was thinking too many thoughts at once. Sorry, I'll pass and come back to me later.
And I just want to say another thing. I just want to kind of say that, again, I really want to frame that as just my way of looking at the world in a way that serves me, and I'm not imposing it on anyone, and I'm not, that's just the way that I choose to look at things. I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
Acceptance. This is what I was talking about. Acceptance of the world as it is, so that when you hear some religious people say, "If God wills," or as God meant it to be, it's just the way things are, and it's sort of, if you take it out of the religious context, it's sort of like saying, "I'm accepting the way things are." What will happen tomorrow is what should happen tomorrow. I mean, the world is as it should be. Things are as they should be. I'm accepting my place in the world. I think maybe that might be. Sorry, Margaret.
Which could also be a person's intention of it's God's will. It could be that's the place in the universe for this to have happened, whatever that is.
I think that's an important point to make, a distinction to make on karma. And I would say that as we talk and the more clear I get on this, and my understanding of karma is that karma is a tool for empowerment. And when you use it as a tool for empowerment to say that what I think and say and do impacts the world, and so that puts me in a place of responsibility and a place of empowerment, as opposed to using it the other way to say everything happens, it's God's will, it's because of karma, and putting you in a place of disempowerment. And this is where we start like what we were talking about before, as the words are distinct from the state. Yeah. And that the state is trumping the words basically in that context. And so I think that any concept, because it's just a concept. I mean, all these things we're communicating back for are our best humanly possible way of understanding this vast universe. And when we think about the concept of any concept, forget karma, forget prayer, doesn't matter what it is. If you use it from a place to empower yourself, then I stand behind it and I say utilize it, regardless of what it is, as long as it's aligned with the larger system.
Thanks, Jason. So, Jonathan, what do you have a response to that?
So my contribution would be that things like prayer, which I think you talked about last week, and things like karma fundamentally cannot be verified at the moment. And so what we have to do is learn how to live without knowing what is the case in those regards. That is the human endeavor. Right. Vin, has your insight come back to you?
No, it was just what I said before. Just that, it's I think an acceptance of the way things are in the bigger scheme of things is probably the way to go forward. I mean, as Jonathan pointed out very clearly, that it's a lot like the concept of God. We should maybe just accept that it's not provable either way, and move forward with what you think is the best way to behave. I mean, possibly believing that it is true, that karma does work, that it is dished out by some metaphysical, spiritual force or something, is perhaps a better way to go. But we're sort of in 1 hour. We've covered so many different things and very lightly skated across a lot of the top of them. It's very difficult, as Bronwyn said, to sort of do this in one show. But I think we've picked the scab off the top.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, we've exposed a whole lot of issues underneath and new threads. In closing, from myself, I think whatever you focus on, you draw more into your focus. And so if we want to align ourselves with our world and the universe, or for self-empowerment, or we want to align ourselves with the good of the world, or the improvement of other people's situations, then we can effect that to some degree by focusing our attention more in that area. So to me, that's as good as I can come up with for addressing karma within my power, bringing it back to my own power. If karma is there and it is cause and effect, and we know that cause and effect does exist on a physical level. We know that. Yeah, you walk out in front of a car, you'll get run over. So why wouldn't it exist on another level?
Could I add just one tiny thing? This has been on my mind the whole time, concept of karma, isn't that it's a little bit like the religious, the Christian thing of do good to others and they'll do good to you. But I think the act of giving, or the act of doing good, again, it's a good is a subjective or objective, but the act of actually doing good is instantly returning good to you. That if I were to walk up to someone and give them a flower on the street and say God bless you, or sorry, again I'm pulling religion into it, have a nice day, I'm instantly filled with gratification and joy. And could that be considered a type of karma, that it's instant?
Yeah. And I agree. That's what I was thinking also when we talk about systems theory, that it comes down to, and Jonathan, this is what I wanted to say before, is that it comes down to feedback, right? So we may have a limited view on whether or not this is impacting something or not, but you get feedback right away. If you give that person a flower and they smile, you get instant karma, you get feedback. If you walk up and you tell someone to go piss off, and they respond by punching you in the face, you get instant feedback from the system.
Or now, even if they don't respond, it's all just internal anger that's hurting yourself.
Mm-hmm. And also you get there's also things that take a longer time for you to get feedback. So like if you're smoking, you may not notice for 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, or whatever it is, right? And there's some things you only get feedback once a lifetime, playing in traffic in black at night, So there's lots of aspects to this, but the feedback is there. And a lot of times we can get feedback from previous generations, like you can learn from previous generations that you don't want to stick your hand in a dark hole, and at least you don't want to do that out here in South Florida.
So in finishing, I think it comes down to, I like to finish on this note. I think we finished last week on the acceptance, which has already been raised by Vin, and the tolerance for different perceptions, different viewpoints, different opinions, whatever it is. I think it's great. I think this is our step. This is my contribution in some minute way to be able to have these conversations in a, you know, and listening to other people's quite divergent views in some cases. And we're tolerant. We can tolerate that. So being prepared to live with what may not, you know, at some point in time or at some level be comfortable to us, but we're tolerant and accepting of it. So thank you all for being so forthright and willing to contribute your views. And just in finishing off, if we run around the rooms, telling people who you are and what you do, and hoping that people will follow, because we've got 58 viewers, 7 are still in the room. So I'm hoping, you know, people have come here because they have an interest in this type of conversation, and go follow. So Vin, if we start with you.
I've very much enjoyed this discussion. I'm glad that you, Jonathan, and Jason could both make it, because you know, sometimes digging deep into those little bits, as little as we did there, is really thought-provoking. And I'm going to go away and think a lot about what all of us have said here. So it's good to have the thought-provoking stuff. I'm Vin Brown, Vintuitive. Call me what you will. Either one of those will do. I run a web development business. I do social media promotion, and I do a couple of shows on Blab. If you want to know anything about them, you can go to vintuitive.com and read about them. Thanks.
Jason.
All right. Again, I want to thank you for starting this conversation, Margaret. Always an interesting experience how it develops. So yeah, I'm Jason Schneider, Perception Boss. I am founder of Perception Mastery, perceptionmastery.com. I'm a neurosemanticist. So my expertise is in the structure of subjectivity and how meaning influences behavior.
Jonathan.
My name is Jonathan Wilson. I'm a human being like you. And what should I share? I'm going to share two things. First, I'm going to share this. This is a link to a website I'm building. It's for a company that my girlfriend and I are starting in order to try to stand on our own 2 feet. It's called yummybevs.com. You can check it out if you want to support it. Buy a shirt. It's on there. Mm-hmm. Other than that, today I was made the head of North America for BitNation, which is a new cool cryptocurrency company that is attempting to create a market basically for government services, so we can all secede into the cloud and not have to suffer under this tyranny of momentum and inefficiency called the nation state. There you go.
Wow. Sounds interesting. I'll be checking out your Yummy Bevs.
Please do. And if you have like a wedding or something like that, we'll come make some drinks.
Will you come to Darwin?
Politics or religion.
Will you come over to Darwin, Australia?
Oh God, we need to get a little bigger, or the bill's going to be kind of high. It's contingent upon whether you'll pay for it or not. I'll go a lot of places.
Anything possible. And I'm Marg Lambert. I'm a speaker, author, psychologist, and I run these spiritual conversations every Friday the same time, and also Wellbeing Wednesday around the same time as well. So thanks so much, Jonathan, Jason, and Vin. I think your contribution's been fantastic. So really pleased that you jumped in. And all the people on the side, Peter stayed till the end, and maybe Sasha. Thank you so much. And to all the people who are viewing the replay, it's available on my webpage. And I hope you will tune in again for the next spiritual conversation. I'm thinking next week. I jotted down a word before we started so that we could have an idea of what we might be talking about next week. Forgiveness often comes into spiritual conversations. So the place of forgiveness, I thought we'd like to focus on next Friday. So hope you can join us. So thanks so much.